Hello, guys. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia joining you on yet another week, a very eventful week. And together with me is our Mind Podcast returning champion, columnist, host of the India Rising podcast, our good friend Mohal Joshi. Hello, Mohal. How are you?
Hi Adit, how are you? Good to be
Good,
back.
good, man. Always great to have you. So, what a fascinating weekend it's been, man. I mean, it's what? I mean, we think that the craziest has already happened, but the crazier keeps happening again and again and again. I mean, I'm obviously talking about it. It seems like the Ukraine-Russia war happened like God knows, like however long it was. It's been more than 2 months since the Russian
hmm
invasion of Ukraine, and
Yeah,
there was
February 24th, I believe. So it's almost like 3 months
three
now.
months. Yeah, it'll be 3 months by the time a lot of our listeners are going to be listening or watching to the podcast, watching this podcast. But the reason, like, we want to start with is the inflation crisis, the macroeconomic crisis around the world. We are going to be talking about politics. There is a little bit of Indian politics, American politics update as well involved, and some fascinating stories. But we're going to start with the whole inflation discussion. Are we, should we use the dreaded I word or the R word? Maybe the I word first, which is inflation, right? Are we staring down at the bottom of the barrel, or is there a long ways to go to reach the bottom of the barrel?
I mean, inflation, I think like the last CPI print was 8.3, so it was kind of slowing down if you want to say like year over year. So from 8.5, we reduced to 8.3 now. If you look at all the macroeconomic indicators, there's been more slowing down, at least in the US. So I would expect that the CPI numbers to go down, but mind you, like compared to 2 years, like things are not getting any cheaper. I mean, technically, you could print, let's say, in the next few months, a zero CPI, right? Which means the prices didn't change from 2021 to 2022, but they did change a lot from let's say 2019 to 2021. So that's, let's say, a thing was costing $100, right? So if it went up, let's say 5%, it was 205. Then another 5%. I mean, not too sure on the what would be the exact math, but let's say it's like 110, for example. But then let's say even if you get 2020 to 22, like the price might still remain 110. So that you might say, oh, there's 0% year over inflation, but it still it costs like $10 more than what it used to cost pre-pandemic.
Oh, and I mean, you can feel the pinch, right? I mean, we are in this America. We people in India are feeling the pinch too. As a matter of relief, actually, for the people in India, actually, a massive policy, update was announced by Nirmala Sitharaman. Uh, Basically, what the petrol and diesel prices were slashed by, I think, 8 and 6 rupees respectively, as well as the
Hmm.
gas prices.
Yeah.
But um, I think the issue here is, and really the detailed issue here is, how is this going to be, related to the common man? Like, yes, the petrol and diesel will provide interim relief, right? But in terms of transportation, in terms of the crisis of supply chain shortages because of the lockdowns in China, you're seeing in the West, to some extent in India as well, it's a cascading effect, right? So the stock markets have taken an absolute beating, as have cryptocurrencies and so forth. But I those might be unrelated. It just seems like the world is back in a pre-COVID stage. The first few days of COVID, in terms of complete economic crisis, just when we thought that we were recovering, and the economic crisis is not because of uh, there is shortage of demand, there is shortage of supply, right? So this is a very strange situation we are in. During COVID, there was a shortage of demand and there was an
Hmm.
abundance of supply. So the supply was cut in many cases. Now the demand is dramatically and drastic. I mean, look at the airfares. I mean, they're ridiculous, right? The other day I was booking in tickets to somewhere. I was joking that I just felt like I traded away my rights for something out there
I mean,
asking away.
I think in the last CPA print, I think airfare was up like 30% or something year over year. So that was one of the highest components in the CPI gauge.
Yeah, like I mean, I was joking. Like if I have to plan more for my next trip, kayak might be my most visited website even before Twitter. So And mind you, none of them pay me. But let's talk a little bit about in detail about the retail side inflation in US, and then I want you to talk a little bit about the retail side inflation in India and what can people expect, right? How will the economic rejuvenation happen?
So the thing is, I mean, as many know that there is a supply side issue. Now the Fed knows that unless they cool down demand, there is no good solution to this crisis. So what they are doing is they're artificially crushing the demand by taking out the liquidity from the overall credit markets and also raising rates because they know that they are kind of stuck and the only thing is to, I mean, I know the Fed chairman Jerome Powell has said like I'm going to promise like a softish landing, but I guess nobody believes him at this point. That I think the other thing is they're up against the midterm elections, right? So
Hmm.
unless the situation improves where inflation is more under control, they are staring down the barrel in terms of the midterm results. So to bring inflation under control, they have to just crush it. And I mean, Powell has as much said that we cannot control supply chain issues, but the only thing is he can cool demand. So like I mean, they're pulling liquidity out of, I mean, with that, as you said, stock market or like cryptocurrencies or like anything, like even bonds are taking a beating, massive beating this year. So with the liquidity drained out, everything is crashing, and unfortunately the world also has to take the pain along with the US. But
Yep.
US is like actually among the OECD countries, like interestingly US has the highest inflation, which is usually never the case. But I mean, when you print like 40% of your GDP in, let's say, the last couple of years, I mean, this is this. I mean, the interesting stat of the other day I saw was that 40% of all dollars in US dollars in existence have been printed since the beginning of the pandemic.
Hmm.
So, I mean, this has just caused massive amounts of money being pushed into the hands of people, and obviously demand has gone up. While, as you say, the supply chain issues have not relented.
Hmm. Hmm. It's interesting, right? I mean, you're talking about the liquid flow. I mean, the trillions of dollars that were pumped in, and then the war happening in Ukraine is not, helping the cause because obviously there has to be aid, and there's going to be deliberate inflation. There's going to be the oil price issue, and the oil prices have touched an all-time high. I don't know if OPEC is going to increase the production. There had been a severe drop in U.S. domestic production in some cases as well. So, what you're saying is that very strange line that we always use, which I have, I don't know if people actually mean when they say it, but it's going to get worse before it gets better, right? Would you say that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you follow like people who follow the stock market for years and years, they say like
No,
there's not been a
I follow
capitulation.
I follow you, and because you follow them, in turn, I get all the information from you.
I mean, they think that there's not been a severe stock market capitulation. Like I guess, like there will be a stage where nobody wants to own or buy stocks. I mean, even on the oil stuff, I think you said right. Like, I mean, the crisis hasn't helped because the Russian oil has been banned from the market, and OPEC. I mean that's another. I don't want to go on another tangent, but like UAE and Saudi Arabia had not been happy with the Biden administration for like various. I don't want to go into detail. It'll be like an other unending topic. So nobody wants to increase production to overcome. And also the US, interestingly, since the beginning of the pandemic, let's say even if the supply they could recoup, let's say by lifting sanctions from Iran or Venezuela, the refining capacity has gone by 1 million barrels. So it's a refining shortage more than a supply issue. I mean, there are supply issues, no doubt. So the war hasn't helped where like, I mean, Russia is the biggest supplier of, let's say, potash, which makes fertilizers, one of the biggest non-OPEC oil producers. US imports, I mean, mind you, I mean, this is the hilarious I mean, I would say like hilarious, but I mean, maybe a poor choice of word. But US imports like $1 billion dollars worth of uranium from Russia. But because the US electricity prices will go crazy, obviously they have banned oil. I mean, they might preach India about like not importing oil from Russia, but they continue to import like $1 billion worth of uranium because, it's supposedly not on the sanctions list for whatever reason.
ये क्या है कि this is like this a list is a very interesting thing, right? It's like saying कि your 100% attendance will be marked if you attend the first 5 periods. The sixth period is optional. Now the thing is, what is the sixth period optional? That is not being decided by the class teacher. It's by decided by the class monitor, the biggest bully. So that is the tragedy of the world market, right? But moving from there to the debate about cars, that is another shortage people are facing, right? Okay, not only are the oil prices high, people want to buy the things that consume oil, and even they are shortage because of the semiconductor
Yes,
chips.
semiconductor.
Yeah, so now there is a big thing in electric car. Now electric cars and stuff. So theoretically, you would have seen that this would have resulted in a reinforcement of electric vehicles and in that industry. But even that industry has taken beating. The stock market, the stocks of those have fallen. And is it because of unreal expectations on their part also because they also face the brunt of semiconductor
I
shortage?
mean, see, semiconductor issue is a thing, but I think it's becoming better because as the Fed is tightening, demand is cooling, so that's what they want, right? Like people not to order. I mean, a gasoline car, EV car, but see, the EV car also is another issue because you need to procure lithium, you need to procure cobalt. I mean, interestingly, Elon Musk, I mean, who's in the news for like many other reasons nowadays with his Twitter account, but he also said like in 2 years the biggest issue is going to be procuring enough material to get batteries down, so I mean with every car manufacturer manufacturing EV, I mean, and with all the rare earth metals, like they are all in like countries which are not friendly with the US, be it Russia or China.
Interesting, interesting. So then let's get back from there to I know we keep moving around the world, but this is a freaking world crisis, right? So let's go to China, where there was actually a lockdown, and this is the classic example of the Chinese actually not giving a crap of what the world is saying, because the entire world has said that lockdowns were in very specific cases or at a large scale they don't work. We've seen things like Omicron variants and stuff. You don't know what's happening. This new BA2 thing is here. So and ultimately the problem issue with China is their vaccines are not working, right? So could we see almost sort of and this is not doing wishful thinking, right? But do you think Chinese deal with American vaccine companies is a chance happening or not?
I doubt it. I mean, they would want to uh, import any vaccines from the West. I think they will continue their own path of the heart. I mean, and as you know, like she like is like up for the third term. Like I think later this, I think believe in October when the Communist Party holds its 5 year like to renew like Xi for a third term. I mean, basically like he'll be for life. The
Yeah.
president of China. So the thing is, he cannot have the COVID scare, like deter people's confidence in him. So like he is going on this hard lockdown. I think maybe post October they could go more easy on future lockdowns, but for now it's all hands on deck because if there is any spillover effect, he doesn't want his third term to be jeopardized by it.
Yeah, no, true. And I mean, a few things, small mercies, so to speak, like a couple of days ago, if I look at the data, COVID cases are rising up, of course, but the deaths proportionally are going down, and it's very, heartening to hear that, there are not as many fatal cases. India seems to be doing very well amongst the, countries, but the Western countries, Germany, France, the US also has more than 100,000 cases. So it's interesting almost the way it is going about. So I mean, clearly the pandemic is far from over, but there is a lot of things happening. Australia is another thing where it has more than 50 to 49,000 cases. There is now Australia has also been in an interesting situation where it has had an election, and Australia had some of the harshest COVID lockdowns, and the Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been voted out. So it's I don't know. Are we going to see? Are we in an era of COVID elections now? Is the 2022 midterm? This is providing my segue towards the political part of this discussion. Is the 2022 midterm with Joe Biden also going to be decided on what his response to COVID was, or the
No,
economic
I don't
recovery?
think so. I mean, if you look at what like the polling on what's the most important issue, like one issue stands out, and it's like inflation, inflation, inflation. I mean, and the economy,
But
obviously.
I think you can relate that also to COVID, right? With how they were fighting inflation. Did the inflation, be triggered with the excessive sort of printing of money during COVID? Could Biden have done better in terms of negotiating with the sides in the whole Russia-Ukraine? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. I have no position on this,
Hmm.
but I do see that it is clearly affecting the Democrats. And if you look at even someone like Nate Silver, who leans, I would say, towards the Democratic Party or towards the left, Joe Biden's approval is 40.7%. And, you know, the whole debate about the right to choose, the whole abortion law debate, Roe versus Wade debate, that debate has been forgotten in America in the last week, 2 or 3 weeks. And it takes me back to, and I'm not saying forgotten as in people are not talking about it. Women's rights groups are talking about it. Progressives are, liberals are. I mean, a lot of people, like, I mean, I have spoken myself about it. About my position. My position is pro-choice and very similar to what India's position is and stuff. But the issue here is it has not resonated the way it is to shift the momentum towards the Democrats, because we have to be a little real and look at real issues and what is happening. And Joe Biden's approval ratings have actually gone down by 3% more after that. So, I mean, there was a little bit of an uptick, but now the disapproval rating is 54%. That is
Yeah.
really bad.
I think, I mean, even if you remember, like, I think we had a podcast after the elections in 2020 where I had written a piece, I think, believe in like early January. I had written a long, I mean, pretty long piece on mind makers. I mean, I urge the viewers to go look at it, where I said that there are a lot of headwinds against the Democrats. I mean, if you look at the top result, like the Democrats did, I mean, they won the presidency, but they didn't do well in the House and the Senate as expectations. And with all the headwinds heading into the 2022, I mean, on top of that, you had first Afghanistan debacle, and I mean, now it's just inflation. I mean, obviously, Roe versus Wade has given the Democrats something to latch upon and push the. I mean, Republicans, I think, are on the back foot with Roe versus Wade after a very long time, because it's all been about inflation and supply chain issues. I mean, I had read a statistic that 40% of people in US, like, they have less than $1,000 of savings in their bank account. So I mean, they wouldn't have benefited from, let's say, the increase in home prices or stocks over the last couple of years. So they are really suffering. And I mean, that's why, like, I mean, it was clear, I guess, in January to me, like, that Powell had to crush inflation. I mean, that was his single mandate. I mean, nothing else mattered, because otherwise, Democrats are just looking at a complete sweep out. I mean, like, as Obama famously said after the 2010 midterms, when the Tea Party rode to power, like, it was a shellacking of sorts. That's what they're looking at right now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And what is interesting is to see the new maps. If you look at the new maps in in the whole, the seats, the way the seats were drawn and stuff, it's kind of crazy because you have seven competitive seats wiped out, and there are 171. Like, there were more competitive seats in the last map. Now there's more Democrat seats, less Republican seats. Especially in Illinois and New York, the drawing of the maps has been crazy. I mean, if the Republicans are doing the sort of a lot of gerrymandering and stuff, Democrats are no far behind. And
But the New
Illinois,
York map was upheld by their
no,
Supreme
it's
Court.
still no. Now it's under
So,
litigation. Yeah,
so the thing
but
was that some of the Republican gerrymandering was going to be cancelled out by the gerrymandering in California and New York. But then, if the New York one is upheld, that's against advantage Republicans. Or it would have been a washout nationally. But yeah, gerrymandering. I mean, we can have another podcast on
yeah, it's
the
unbelievable. Like,
craziness of gerrymandering. But I think the Republicans did to a large extent after the 2010 midterms and the 2020 midterms. So that's why I wrote even in that piece, like, it was doubly important for Democrats to do well to control the gerrymandering processes, but like they didn't do well down ballot. Obviously, Biden won the race, and I think they will suffer the consequences again. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, I mean, the number of, let's say, competitive seats which could swing either way, even in a big wave election, is probably less than 100 out of 435. I mean, maybe 80-ish.
yeah, and I mean, if I look at things like Illinois, where there were five strong Republican seats, and now there are three, and so it was five Republican, two swing. Now there's three Republican, one swing, and 14, like 13 Democrats. I mean, it's insane. And the thing, what is happening is there is cascading effects, and I'm not saying the Republicans don't do it. They've done it in North Carolina, Georgia. There's cascading effects in other states, and it's like it's become a competitive, nonsensical battle. And like if
Mhm.
someone from outside of who's not stayed in US or not followed US politics were to come and look at these seat arrangements, I mean, they'll be shocked. They're like, to quote that famous line that Dhritarashtra was saying in Jane Bhi Do Yaro, the character of the, he said, "Kya
I
ho
know,
raha
I know.
hai?" He said, "Kya ho
Yeah,
raha hai?" So this
yeah.
is exactly what I
I mean,
think. When I look at
and see, like people complain, like let's say if they're on the left, they will complain like about like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, or if you're on the right, they complain about AOC and the squad. But this is what happens. Like if you have highly non-competitive districts, you get political extremes on both sides. I mean,
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely, and this is truly the case. So now let's move from there to a little bit of a discussion on India, right? अभी इंडिया में आजकल राहुल गांधी वापस चर्चे में थे, and I mean, I very tongue in cheek. I said Bilal Bhutto was also in news. I was like, maybe Gandhi and Bhutto need to have a debate with Karan Thapar moderating in London. And if Thapar hears that he has to moderate a debate with another Bhutto, he might get excited just again about his job.
and a
And
Gandhi, right?
and a Gandhi, goodness gracious. No, I think more Bhutto than Gandhi in terms of his considering his proximity with previous Bhuttos. But I mean, jokes apart, let's look at this insanity that he said. Something that Rahul Gandhi said, he talked to some bureaucrats in Europe, and they said that Indian bureaucrats don't even listen and things like that. Were Indian bureaucrats really supposed to be taking orders from European bureaucrats? And first of all, who the hell are these European bureaucrats who are telling this to Rahul Gandhi? I mean, I don't. This is, ये पता है क्या है वो बरखा दत्त और वो सब they all come and the Sabah Naqvis of the world, they'll come and say, I have heard this from this auto wala and rickshaw wala and all these they're very
Cab
skeptical.
driver, cab driver. I think Kaushik Basu is notorious with the cab driver references,
हाँ
right?
कौशिक बासु या I want to one first ask him कि कौन सा
नहीं,
कैब ड्राइवर फिर
नहीं,
पूरा
नहीं,
उबर
मैं तो कैब लेता हूँ, मुझे साथ कोई ऐसी बातें नहीं करता है अभी तक.
उबर में हेलीकॉप्टर में जाता होगा the helicopter pilot is saying I mean my point is an Indian policy I mean policy is just silly I mean I would if Kaushik Basu is actually having the conversation I would like to meet the cab driver he's probably annoyed with Mr.
Huh.
Basu
Oh,
for
and then
since
every time he meets a driver who's like very well versed in like stuff like this, like
no,
complex stuff.
sometimes I feel that maybe the cab driver, maybe that person driving him should have been the chief economic advisor of India. You would not have been as much of a disaster as Mr. Basu. I'm pretty sure he or she, whoever it is, they would have done a far better job because for once they would have stood up to Manmohan Singh and not acted like an eloquent darbari that Mr. Basu does these days. But apart from that, the funny thing is that when you hear Rahul Gandhi make such statements, you know, you almost wonder that what the hell are these Congress people smoking? They actually think they're going to win a single election with Rahul Gandhi going, and saying these things. Doesn't matter where he's saying. I think he said this in a conference in London or something. I forget. So I don't know. What do they want? Like, what is your understanding
I
of
mean,
this?
I think he thinks like he's trying to influence the voters, but I mean, if you talk to a swing voter, this is not going to do anything for them. I mean, they don't trust the Congress party anymore. I mean, let's say if you are not happy with the BJP guy, I'm not saying like everybody's unhappy, but let's say even if there was an unhappy segment, you have to project something positive. Okay, I mean, you can criticize Modi all day and long, I mean, which they should, I mean, in theory, but I mean, you have to have some positive projection of what is alternative. You can say, okay, Modi is bad because of XYZ, but what is your projection? If you are like even 10 times worse than what he is, then obviously nobody's going to vote for you. And I mean, just yeah, sometimes I wonder like who is advising him. I mean, like they should be fired the first, like I mean, like or just running down the party even more and more day by day. Assuming there's a party exists, I mean, which is like practically non-existent.
No, not true. I mean, and the problem is, let's look at Gujarat, right? So Gujarat, there is an interesting thing. They're trying to fight again. Aam Aadmi Party is now trying to get a foot in. And I mean, we are 6 months away from an election in Gujarat. But if you're really wanting to challenge and if you really want to run by the face, right now is where you should. Narendra Modi has made more trips to Gujarat than any other time in the recent memory that I can think of. That's not even counting Amit Shah's trips and so forth. And the reason that is happening is because Mr. Modi knows what is at stake. I don't think Mr. Gandhi even gives a damn about what is at stake for his. And which biggest thing for Congress in Gujarat is their existence. That if they lose an election badly again by 12-13% of the vote, and Aam Aadmi Party gets 5-6% of the vote, which is what looks likely, the Congress is going to capitulate.
I think, I mean, I might make a prediction which I don't know how well it will go like 6 months from now, but I think I wouldn't be shocked if Aam Aadmi hits the like 10% of the like a double digit number. It can easily hit high like single digit, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's a 10%. I mean, maybe we'll revisit this in 6 months from now to see how it's going. That's why,
Maybe closer,
huh?
maybe a little closer than 6 months.
I mean, little closer than 6 months, but I mean, we'll know the results only in like late December. So I would be not be shocked at this point for a 10%. I mean, the thing is, like nobody trusts the Congress anymore in Gujarat. I mean, we have said this before on earlier podcast. It's a rotating basis. I mean, now Hardik Patel has resigned, so nobody knows who's in charge. I mean, I think one good thing like for the BJP is that the anti-BJP vote is getting fragmented, so they will ride home much comfortably and easily.
I was saying that Rao, this whole debate about Gujarat and stuff like that, the Hardik Patel's thing, makes me feel very funny. He wrote something about the Congress leaders are not interested in doing stuff for the people of Gujarat, but are more interested in ordering chicken sandwiches and making sure
Hmm.
that Delhi comes, right?
That comes on time.
That comes on time. And my second question was going to be, who do they send to get those sandwiches, right? Is that, but that is my snarkiness can
नहीं
wait for.
नहीं, knowing how foodies the Gujaratis are, like someone ने asked कि भी कौन सी दुकान से मंगाया था.
हाँ, नहीं, the Gujarati in me also like તમે બરાબર કે એ બી 5 star થી જ મંગાઈ હતી. I mean, things like that. So pardon me for slipping into Gujarati because I had to, for this line. So, but seriously, I mean, who who in the thing, and by the way, before viewers ask me, no, we are not going to talk about monkeypox right now. Please look at Mohal's timeline. He's actually done a thread on this. We don't want to be spreading, panic and things like that. There are many smarter people than us who have actually said it, and Mohal has quoted all of them and made a nice thread. So, I hope, Mohal, you don't mind me calling all the scientists working on these smarter people than us. So we have to give them
Yeah,
credit.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we are nobodies, right? I mean, we don't call ourselves experts like as how some people on Twitter do, right? So,
Yeah, exactly. हम तो कौन है, हम आम आदमी है. केजरीवाल से भी मतलब, 2 step नीचे. So
mhm.
because that gives us the license to say anything we want ना. केजरीवाल, मैं कौन हूँ, मैं आम आदमी हूँ करके कुछ भी बकवास करते हैं. तो we're like, हम तो केजरीवाल से भी नीचे हैं, so we'll say more rubbish than he does. But no, go on. In all seriousness about Gujarat, yeah.
Yeah, I think like this time BJP will win easily, as I was saying. Like, I mean, even in the panchayat elections and the municipal elections, they did pretty well. I mean, if you look at Surat, I think AAP really cut into the Congress vote. I mean, see, there is a 40%, even in the when Modi was CM, there's a 40% anti-BJP vote there. The main thing for Congress is to sweep it up, which they did in last time because there was no other big party and they got I think 42%. So that's their challenge, like how to get to 45%. But if let's say app takes even 5%, like that means that they are nowhere to be seen. I mean, you straight away get a 10-15% delta. So BJP will, and I think app, I won't be shocked if they get like high single or even 10 digit percent. They might not win seats for now, but I think their long term goal is that to replace the Congress party. So let's say maybe in 10 years from now, or sorry, like 5.5 years from now, they could be looking at maybe they might be the main challenger to BJP in like Gujarat and all across India. Like wherever it's a bipolar fight with BJP, that's a long-term up strategy that replace Congress. And whether if there's no regional party, then that would be the whole
No,
game.
and it, it's fascinating that you know from 1987 when Mr. Modi was made in charge of the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation polls, and at that time BJP didn't do as well. Congress was in power everywhere, including in Gujarat. Madhav Singh Solanki and post, Amar Singh Chaudhary and all, they were there, and he did an alliance with the Janata Dal, then Janata Dal, and Cheman Bhai Patel, and they stormed back to power in 1990. It is almost a similar situation in Gujarat again, where you have a very dominant party nationally with the BJP, the Congress on the decline, with the Congress in that at that time it was Janata Dal led by Chimanbhai Patel and then the Aam Aadmi Party type force. So I don't know how that is going to pan out, but it's going to be fascinating and probably the most electrifying election in Gujarat's recent history. Not in terms of results, I think in terms of impact of
Yeah, the
what.
last election was much closer. You could see it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you predicted it. Even I wrote back then. I mean, that like I don't think maybe in the low 100. So maybe I missed like by one. So, but I
I'll
think
tell
this
you
time
this.
they will easily win like
When I
way
came
above
back from
100.
Gujarat, this was about the same time, February, March. I said 95 to 100, and on the election day, I switched it to 95 to 105 just to be in the range. It was 99, and so I was like, oh, wow, I would have been within the range. And at that time, a lot of people had claimed victory who had predicted 115, 120 because BJP was leading in 115, 120, when I visited Saurashtra, and I'm keen to visit Saurashtra again. I hope to visit Gujarat again before the Gujarat elections. I think that's where the battle is going to be fought in terms of the Congress, but in terms of the election perspective, the battle is in the cities. Ahmedabad, Vadodara, Surat, and Rajkot again are
Rajkot,
going to
yeah.
be deciding who is the chief minister going to be. Will it be Mr. Bhupendra Patel again? That also remains to be seen if BJP goes to fight again under his leadership, or who else. It'll be fascinating. But any closing thoughts on that before we move on to the last topics and our recommendations?
No, I mean, we also like BJP should win much comfortable. I mean, if you remember, like watching the Gujarat results, I think at one point Congress was ahead in terms of seats. Remember, I think it was like 9:30 in the morning or something, and it almost gave a lot of the BJP supporters a heart attack. I mean, but like I
Yeah.
think like BJP came back to get 99.
Oh, I kept oh my God, I remember that because I did a whole thread where they were like, oh, Congress is ahead, and people are jumping up and down, and I'm like, calm down. Ahmedabad and Surat, I saw the trends out of 27 seats, two or three or maybe five had reported results. And they're like, yes, but there are 22 other seats, and look at the trends. I'm like, no, look at the cities. And then you'll see out of 22 or 23 remaining, BJP won
Yeah,
16.
yeah.
And that just flipped it. Actually, even more than that, because they won 12 out of 12 in Surat and 17 out of 21 in Ahmedabad, so or something like that. It was a pretty wild number. Uh, so whatever it was, I'm forgetting the exact, because 21 is the extended Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad itself is 17, so Smith I think 13 or 14 जीते. So, but bottom line is they swept, except for the two or three seats in the old part of Ahmedabad, which where they've realistically not won since a long time. So that's the perspective on that. Before we end, I think we'll go back to the economic debate, right? Should we be in seeing a little more hardship and stuff in terms of people's jobs and stuff, or do you think that we are on a trajectory to improvement? The thing about getting better is you don't see the phase from 0 to 50. You only see 50 to 100, and you're like, "Acha, ab theek hai." But has the recovery started, or are we a little while away from the recovery to begin?
You mean in terms of like
Economic
the
recovery, like easing up, because you said easing of inflation, right? But easing of inflation also has to be coupled with other economic indicators in the right direction.
no, I think like it will go. I mean, even if you look at the like big tech companies, I mean, many have instituted like hiring freezes, and also there have been some layoffs in certain companies. So I think people will unfortunately lose jobs. I mean, as we said, like the we heard the last year that the main theme was like the great resignation, right? A lot of people resigned to find new jobs, but this year it might be like I mean, if let's say if the stock market keeps going and people's wealth or the retirement accounts get wiped out, then it could be the great unresignation. Who knows? So things will unfortunately get worse. I mean, US, I mean, the GDP contracted like I think like minus 1.6 if in the first quarter, and I think everybody thinks that quarter two, so we'll officially be in a recession at end of June. But let's say if there was surprise recovery, I mean, maybe, I mean, it all depends. Like, see, the Fed has to tighten until something breaks in the credit markets or somewhere. and then they have to say, oh no, 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 we went too far and now we have to reverse and start printing again. So until that time, I mean, things unfortunately will become worse. And but I think
Yeah.
India is in a much better situation because they didn't print as much and a lot of stimulus was not handed. I mean, there were a lot of calls on the Modi
Also, I
government
think
to do that.
in the situation because of some spending. So if they have cut the spending, India has actually gone the other way. It's actually cut spending, and
Yeah, the government
yeah,
did a lot of welfare, like in terms of like giving like 5 kg of grains to like all family, 80 crore families, but it wasn't the kind of like the handout in terms of financial stuff. I mean, there was some financial handout obviously in India, but not to the extent that was in the US, you know. So
no,
hopefully, like we hope that India gets unscathed, but obviously the main issues will be like the oil prices for India, you know, going forward.
no, and that's what I'm saying. So right now, obviously, in petrol and gas and stuff, they did spend more and stuff, but that was more of a relief measure, and I'm sure they'll
Yeah.
find the revenue and
Also
stuff.
the rupee depreciation, right? Because that's what hurts India the most. So I mean,
Yeah.
like all with the dollar strengthening due to the upcoming recession, I mean, all the currencies are depreciating. So more the rupee depreciates, it hurts. I mean, the Indian exporters are enjoying it, right? But the import bill just keeps going up and up, up, and like adds
America
to the
is in
deficit.
America is in a strange situation where the America is weakening, but the dollar is strengthening.
Yeah, I mean I mean that would be another debate, but like that's like every when there is risk, everybody the flight to safety is US dollar or treasuries, right? So
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, interesting points, Mohal. I think we haven't even realized, and we've crossed the 35-minute threshold already. So,
yeah.
and we are getting close to, the end of the podcast. So, I have to ask for recommendations. So, what are your recommendations this week for
So
our
like
listeners?
I mean this not recently, but some time ago I watched this movie called Sharmaji Namkeen. So it was
Ah,
the last movie that like Rishi Kapoor did. I mean it's a bit of jarring to like have like half the movie done by Paresh Rawal. But I wish
hmm.
like Rishi Kapoor, he did fantastic job and he could have done the whole movie, but it's a great watch. I mean, it one of the things it also highlight like how disjointed a movie shot. It's I mean people think it's linearly shot, but it's like shot in pieces. Like you could have the end shot first, then the beginning. So I mean it was like a I think Pareshal could not do the justice to the role that Rishi Kapoor did, and I enjoyed that movie.
No, I think, but to credit of Paresh Rawal, I think he knew that he would always be. It was an uphill battle. You are going up against an actor who's passed away, who's beloved, and who's sort of tailor made for this role.
No, but I mean
But
he also fit like if you look at both the parts, I mean like how Paresh Rawal, I mean Paresh Rawal wouldn't have done a bad job, but when you have the side by side comparison, you always think that Rishi Kapoor fit in that role much better than
absolutely,
with his timing
I
and
think
comedic, you know.
I think the only time, ironically, when it looked a little more believable is that Paresh Rawal had some scenes with Juhi Chawla where he sort of looked more the part than Rishi Kapoor did, which is ironic because Rishi Kapoor, when he was younger, obviously has done many films with Juhi Chawla,
Juhi Chawla,
right?
yeah.
But somehow that camaraderie between Paresh Rawal and Juhi Chawla was very fascinating to watch. But in the chef scenes, Rishi Kapoor is outstanding. So,
Mm-hmm.
excellent recommendation. I would like for people to watch it. I actually just finished watching the movie RRR. Watch it. It's a fascinating movie. It's a different take. I think I'll leave my full judgment to the end of it because I would have absorbed the movie. But I think it's a very interesting attempt as a reinterpretation of history in a way to put it in a very different cinematic format. I just hope we do more of these with contemporary stories. India has many contemporary stories. Not every story has to be one actor or two actors or three actors or four actors coming in and saving the day. I think we can, do it
Yeah. So
differently.
I also have one more recommendation. So like I just forgot. Like yesterday I watched another great movie. I mean it's more for a military buffs or like spy movies. It's called Operation Mincemeat.
Oh, I've
Uh,
been needing to watch it.
yeah, so it's a based on a true story, like how during the beginning, the middle of the World War II, like the Allies wanted to invade Sicily, but they everybody knew that they were going for Sicily, so they had. I mean, I won't give up the story, but they had to do a ruse where they had to fool the Germans, thinking that they wanted to go for Greece, so Hitler would move
Yeah.
his forces to Greece instead of Sicily, and it's actually based on a true story, so it was like a very good movie.
No, no, absolutely. And John Madden has done some fascinating movies. Our folks will remember him from Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, which was shot in India, and its sequel, both done by John Madden, the same director.
It'll be, I mean, the 2020s decade. I mean, we have everything that, unfortunately, I mean, after a calm 2 decades, I mean, obviously we had tragic events like 9/11 and stuff like that. But I mean, we have everything. I mean, I was joking the other day, like we have the geopolitical crisis pre-World War II of the 30s. You have the unlimited printing of during World War II. You have the stagflation crisis of 70s, and I mean you have everything like compressed into 1 decade, which is like
Yeah, yeah,
unbelievable. I mean,
absolutely.
water, and then yeah, and then you have the pandemic of the 1920s, right? We have the Spanish
Absolutely. So
flu.
I was actually 20s is a fascinating thing because you had the no, not fascinating. Because you had the
Yeah,
20s, you had the pandemic, then you had the Great Depression, then you had the World War.
yeah.
You know,
And during the World War, they did
and
unlimited
Holocaust
printing. They did unlimited
from
printing during the World War. And before that,
yeah,
you had the 30s, where like you have a lot of geopolitical crisis in the 30s with
yeah.
Germany and Japan. So you have that. You have the 70s when you had an oil price shock and you had massive inflation. And I mean, you had like all the decades of the 20th century like compressed
Yeah,
into one.
and that's what I'm saying. So I mean, not even there was not even that Great Depression के recovery के बाद सीधा World War हो. Great Depression, then the Holocaust was happening, during the 30s and
Yeah,
early 40s. Then the thing happened. So it's a crazy time.
yeah.
Let's just hope
I mean,
that
and then you
the
had like Cold War dynamics, right? The US and China of the like the 50s. What there was is Russia. Now with China. So I'm saying like you have the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all compressed into 1 decade. So I tell people like 2020 to 2020 decades is going to be one hell of a ride, and we still have 7.5 years left. I mean, just imagine if this was the first 2.5 years of the decade. I mean, I can just imagine, like, I mean, it's going to be, I think, grab onto your seats. It's going to be one hell of a ride this whole decade.
absolutely, absolutely. I think it's going to be great times and not great times. There's going to be some
Yeah, I
difficult
mean,
times.
turbulent times. I mean,
Turbulent times. But जो भी है, we'll be discussing and debating here on my podcast. Well,
yeah.
appreciate you joining, Mohal, and guys, please like, share, subscribe. We'll be back next week. I promise you it won't be as much of a break as it was, but do write to us and look forward to all your questions, comments, and interacting with you again. Till then, it's goodbye from us. Thank you.
Thank you.